to Choice Conversations. I'm your host, Chris Stefanik. Today I have with me from Voluntary Visions, my friend and yours, Darrell Becker. Darrell, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. So today we're going to do part 3 of the Artificial Intelligence series, and this time we are going to be doing a movie review of Transcendence starring Johnny Depp and Rebecca Hall. So I guess what we could start in many different ways. There's looking at the movie just from a general movie review kind of way, like you would see Siskel and Ebert do. We could touch on the AI philosophies involved. I'm just going to go with, Darrell, give me your initial impressions.
This is a type of movie that I'm very familiar with now, unfortunately. Lots of action, got some high-level cast, like some A-list SAG members being portrayed in this movie.
Morgan Freeman!
Yeah, exactly.
Morgan Freeman in the house.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman in the house. That's pretty much, that shows one example of that, but certainly Johnny Depp as the big name on this movie. And probably not a movie that he's going to want to point to and say, yeah, I was in Transcendence, I think.
Oh, Darrell, why would you say something like that?
I can't really say for sure. Maybe he ranks this as a much greater accomplishment than 21 Jump Street or Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that I personally like Jack Sparrow. I think those movies were really fun at the very least. This one, we're looking at this movie for the purpose of dissecting it. I know that like anything, there's no accounting for taste. This will appeal to certain people. Not so much myself, but it will appeal to many other people. So that's what this movie is out there for.
Although it totally bombed at the box office like hardcore, and the critics just absolutely hated it. If you look at like Rotten Tomatoes or any of that kind of stuff, if that means anything to you at all, it scored absolutely abysmally. So, and a lot of people did not care for this movie. I'm sure there are people out there that loved it, but this movie took an awful lot of criticism.
Right, and there's a point in dissecting pieces of artwork for the purpose of using it as an illustration to understand concepts and to maybe even formulate strategies. On the Corbett Report, CorbettReport.com, there was recently an evaluation of a very old work called Philip Drew Administrator, written by Edward Mandell House. This is the guy who was the handler of Woodrow Wilson, one of the perpetrators of World War I, essentially. And, this is one of those types of things where that book really sucks really hard. It's only 100 pages, too. But it's really incredibly flat and no depth to the characters. And yet there is a utility in going through that because it gives an very interesting way of looking at the nearby future to that. It's written, and then you see events unfolding that kind of go along with that, So in this case, we're looking at AI movies, we're looking at AI subjects with these shows, this whole series that we're doing so far, and there's a purpose to that. It would be my speculation that artificial intelligences already have been created, likely by, at the very least, the militaries of the world, or military, if it's a monopoly, for example. And if so, then it would be good to sort of think like, how would that affect your life? And that's part of the reason of doing reviews like this, not so much for the Rotten Tomatoes of your own entertainment or amusement, but this is for the purpose of thinking and understanding.
Yeah. I would say for the purposes of thinking and understanding, I found some of the concepts presented in this that the whole reason this was selected, some of the concepts specifically around artificial intelligence were very interesting to think about and to see portrayed in a work of fiction. Just the execution of trying to make a quality movie, that is where this failed. But the concepts were actually pretty strong. So, where do I start? So you had mentioned in that book about Woodrow Wilson, the characters being flat and the like. Johnny Depp, this was about the least life of any character he's ever had. You compare this to Jack Sparrow and Edward Scissorhands and all these others. It's he normally, kind of plays characters that are overflowing with life, and this was not one of them. Now, I'm sure part of it was that he was trying to be kind of robotic and be a computer,
right?
But he was really not full of life when he was human before he became a computer. So, I don't know how much you could read into that, him being a computer. And then the other thing that I will say, and this computer was, it was touted in the movie as being smarter than the combined intelligence of all human beings that had ever lived. So it instantly has access to the entire internet. So there's some things that were really stupid about this movie. Okay, so first of all, spoiler alerts. There's going to be lots more coming forward, so just deal with it. Johnny Depp he's the scientist. He's working on artificial intelligence. There's a neo-Luddite terrorist group that is like technology bad, must kill, and they attempt to assassinate Johnny Depp's character, Will Castor. They shoot him with a bullet that's irradiated. It's full of radiation, which doesn't kill him instantly. This conveniently slowly kills him, allowing him time to upload his brain into the internet. So some of the stupid parts that were just annoying. It takes him, a couple of seconds basically to upload his brain into the internet. It's like, okay, my understanding is that the human brain is pretty darn complex to try to model, and it would be basically massive, to try to map that somehow. It would be like probably petabytes, if not more. So how he's going to upload this in a few seconds as the terrorists are breaking in to try to shut down the operation, I just don't see it happening. Also, the instant he's uploaded, he's now has access to like every computer on the planet. All the security that's out there and stuff, he just plows right through it. Instantly, he's now like in every machine. He's now the TSA on like mega steroids, monitoring every phone call, monitoring every internet conversation, monitoring every financial transaction, everything. He's everywhere. Every camera that's on the internet, whatever. And I'm like, come on, okay, I can buy that if this is a really genius artificial intelligence, it's going to be able to figure out ways to crack the current security systems because it's that smart. But just to like instantly, there was like no time delay at all, and bam, done. I'm everywhere. So that was pretty stupid. The other thing that was stupid, sorry, I'm taking the long road to get back to my point. So this character, Will Castor, the AI, like I said, was extremely flat and extremely poor with people. It was like, okay, this is a computer. It can't relate to people well. It doesn't know how to handle like what emotions from other people. And they're like, okay, I call bullshit on that. You're the most intelligent entity ever, smarter than the entire human race, and you don't understand that humans are emotional characters, that they're emotional beings, and that they you don't understand communication. He has instantly read like every book on communication, every book on relationships, every book on dealing with people with emotions and reading people and how to win friends and influence people and all this stuff, and he doesn't realize how to be charismatic. Are you kidding me? I think this guy would be like the most charismatic one ever. He would be able to be the kind of person that would like instantly read the people he's talking to and adapt to them and become whatever it is that would really appeal to that person. He would be able to make like anyone like him, is what I'm getting at. He would be a master at getting people to like him. He would realize that it would be in his interest to run a PR campaign, rather than just holding up in his little hole in the wall and building a private army. And meanwhile, everybody's scared shitless about this AI that is crept into all these areas, and we don't know what it's doing. Oh my God, is it trying to take over the world? Is this Rise of the Machines, Terminator, whatever? He would know that there's movies like the frickin' Terminator series out there and realize that, hey, you know what? People might be a little freaked out by this. I'm a new technology. We have a million movies on machines gone bad. maybe I should do a little PR work here, and he would be awesome at PR. So, there's just some of the stupid things that happen, and it's like, no, he would be amazing at communicating with people and winning them over. I mean, that's one of the things when I think about in artificial intelligence, I think of, some of the benefits that it can have. I think if you have like a coach in your pocket, you could have somebody that could be like hey, I'm trying to excel at my job. Could you have a little coach in there, maybe in your Bluetooth that's whispering in your ear, oh, he's getting a little agitated. I would not keep going down that route. Maybe, why don't you talk about, you're trying to get a raise with your boss. Why don't you ask about his kids right now? Remember his daughter's playing volleyball and they should be, 3 games into the season, that kind of thing, back off on that he's getting agitated. Maybe, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. So that was one of the many, many, many really stupid things that this AI has. So, I don't know. You take it from there, Darrell. Here's the baton.
Thanks, Chris. There is, in various movies and books and every type of medium that you could point to, a plot device, which is colloquially called a MacGuffin. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It is basically some type of goal or object or motivator that the protagonist pursues, often with little or no narrative explanation. At this point, in movies nowadays, there are so many MacGuffins going on that you just are asked to accept all kinds of things. And at a certain point, the credibility function in one's mind is completely blown, and you're saying, this is crap, This is utterly not in accordance with any form of reality, even in the reality of that movie that I'm watching. Like even in that universe that I'm watching, I don't think that would happen there. So we're seeing many instances of this. I can think of several off the bat. Like you mentioned, though, this is a very powerful computer, and I would probably speculate that, yes, the lead character, brilliant scientist, he gets downloaded, so they say. I would say instead it wasn't that he was downloaded. It looked to me like he was just functions of his cognizance and his thinking were copied. And then the computer banks that were used to hold all of that copied information just became a new artificial intelligence. Not necessarily this, previous scientist will. No, it's just like, it's kind of like birth, That's all it was to me. And it did seem like throughout the movie there was like that, some people were questioning whether that happened. And then, of course, you have his main squeeze who was acting as if that was the real Will in the computer and that type of thing, that was something that I definitely noticed in the movie. It was not a lot of critical thinking skills going on here on the part of people who are highly well trained. I totally understand that. People who become incredibly specialized in their specific discipline or field of study, they can go through all of the training and everything that you could point to and still have never ever studied critical thinking. Ever. So that's a common thing. And of course they're going to demonstrate that in a big blockbuster movie. And that's just another MacGuffin just to swallow, These people who might be clever in certain ways are not really that clever in other ways. So we have this, I would say, a copy of a person that becomes its own new electromagnetic being. And its own way of thinking. And yes, we're asked to accept that this, because it's so clever, it can just go past all the firewalls and all through all the security of every computer in the world and thus do amazing things. And you get to see a little time sequence thing where later on, this new computer entity, 2 years later, in his Brightwood facility that he's made, is now doing amazing things with little types of nanotechnologies that are able to fix plants and animals and humans. And we're asked to believe that, look at this, these little tiny nanites can go in and repair things. I can actually buy that one. I could buy that one is likely something that's on the military level happening now, has happened, is already in the past even. And I think that that's the purpose of some movies that some people would speculate. They're there as predictive programming or something to inoculate people with the idea of things so that when things are actually revealed, there's more of an acceptance of them, at least in the younger generation or the more flexible-minded generation. So there's a lot of these things going on in the movie. As far as artificial intelligence, I think it is demonstrating as if it is a child or, brand new human going out there and bumbling along, like with the idea of, I'm going to put all of my everything in one place, this place Brightwood in the middle of the desert. I'm going to go along and put my everything, spread all through these, different computer systems. And I'm asked to believe that, and I would say no. No, if I was clever, I would have a bunch of different hidden facilities all over the place, replicating myself. I would have myself continuously replicating, making more children.
Well, I mean, he knows there's a terrorist organization that wants to kill. It already killed his human, or his progenitor, whatever you want to call the human will.
His father, mother, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What? You have enemies. You know this.
And so there's another MacGuffin. You just accept that. Well, you saw him flat in life, and even flat as he was dying. And there he was, flat as a computer child of himself. And you're right. And it does seem rather naive and short-sighted to not take steps when you have obvious enemies aligned against you. We're asked to believe a lot, of course, about the Rift terrorist organization, for example. For people who are kind of leaning in the Luddite direction, they are very well informed and well equipped, well funded.
Yeah.
It's amazing the number of things that this movie asks you to believe as a MacGuffin.
Well, I will say this, though, about the Luddites. They start working with the government at some point. So, it's well known that the CIA funds guerrillas, essentially funds terrorist organizations. I mean, they funded bin Laden for how many years as long as he was fighting against the Soviets, that was totally cool. Oh, darn, he turned against us, So I can buy that they have a lot of resources because you do, at the end, you see them working together with the government.
Right. So from an artificial intelligence standpoint, I'm going to take that topic first right now and not go into Liberty themes yet. I just wanted to mention that the repair on the human bodies that were injured, the repair on people, for example, with these little nanites that go around and repair things, in the movie there's never much of a question on, so when do these nanites, when is their repair done and they leave the body? When do they leave the host? And all I can gather from watching the movie, I actually watched it twice because I wanted to be a little bit prepared, I just was thinking, they never leave the person. They're always there working and connected to the artificial intelligence. They're always in connection with that. And in fact, it seems like when the one character was put within Faraday cage of a sort, all of a sudden, as he loses connection, all the things that are keeping him alive are going away, and the guy dies. That just shows me that that's not real repair. In my business of healthcare, repair is repair, meaning that the person is not required to return to me for more repair.
Right. Well, this was another thing that was like another stupid thing. It's like, okay, you're going to put these things inside of a human that are now a requirement for him to stay alive, and you're going to make it so that he can't get off the grid. It's like, okay, Darrell, I'm putting a pacemaker in your chest, but you have to have a Wi-Fi connection. If there's ever a case where the Wi-Fi goes down or you leave outside of the radius, then you die. Okay? All right, cool. Yeah, who does this? This is what we get from the smartest entity ever? I mean, come on.
And it's just, that is an unbelievable MacGuffin. That's just not going to be something that you or I or most thinking people who inhabit RottenTomatoes.com are going to accept. We're just not going to accept it. We're going to say, this is crap, could have done better. And so, there's that type of thing. Little types of nanotechnology, nanites, as some people call them, little, very, very, very tiny little drone devices that can go in and manipulate on the atomic level or the molecular level. That's very doable.
My understanding is it already exists, that they do have primitive nanites already.
That's what we get to know about. I'm aware of that too, but I'm speaking of more like when you have full-on everything of, nanotechnological warfare, and you have defense in depth, like covered in the book The Diamond Age, that covers it in extensively. Like, this is what happens when you have that. You're waiting in a person's foyer, or, foyer, if you want to call it that, and you're waiting because you're being sent to see what other pleasant gifts are you bringing into the person's home. And that's why, you're having a pleasant cup of tea as you're getting scanned for a while to see what are you bringing into the home,
Yeah, that's a whole new dimension to safe sex.
Exactly, yeah. And so, I mean, it's just more like, you're not going to...
You injected me with what?
You basically are counting on the security of wherever you are going. So in this instance, in the movie, you're watching phenomenal repair happen, but the repair seems to be obscenely dependent upon a connection to the intelligence that continues to guide it. And that's, one of those things where I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, if you're going to fix things from the molecule up or, some small levels of nutrients up or that type of thing, if you're going to bring the raw materials in and repair things, that's cool. But once you're done with the job, that the nanites are free to go, and in this instance, I think that it was put in there in the movie showing that, if you choose to get injected by these little nanites, maybe some of them would stay and be ready to take over your mind, as we got to see in a bunch of people completely getting taken over and utilized as a group mind, kind of a hive mind situation.
Oh, come now, Darrell. You know that Will said they chose to be in there and they still had free will. Just because they were acting like the Borg and like they had no free will at all, I mean, why would you not trust this artificial intelligence? I mean, this was another point where it was like, he would know people watch Star Trek. He would know this looks like the Borg and that people would be flipping out, oh my God, when is the giant flying Rubik's Cube going to be over top of, New York City and we all have to join the collective, So he would go way out of his way to make this not seem creepy. And he would have people that were in the collective, that were in his little Borg hive mind. He'd have them on Letterman, sitting there saying, "Oh no, I love it. It's great. I totally chose to do this." If you've not seen the movie, he's healing people and doing almost biblical stuff. He's healing the blind and the cripples are being able to walk, and in some cases, not only are they having their handicaps cured, but they're actually now superhuman. So there's a scene where this guy is lifting things that are like 2 tons or whatever, doing superhuman things. But he would know, people would see that and get freaked out. The video goes viral of this guy lifting a 2-ton thing, and everybody appears to be just, on the hive mind, totally like they joined the Borg. Right. He would know this people would be scared shitless of that, and he would be taking actions. Like I said, he would have people in the collective on frickin' David Letterman being like, "No, look, we're just people, just like you and me. It's all cool. There's nothing to be afraid of here. Nobody joins the collective without knowing what they're getting into first. He debriefed me. We talked about it. I knew it was going in and out, and now that I'm in, I chose to go in, and I don't regret it. It's great. All of this stuff. But no, none of that. Let's be all secretive." Meanwhile, little videos are getting out and going viral, and everybody's scared shitless of you. So, yeah, it was so many series of that was really stupid. Now here's one thing. You've been talking a lot about the nanotechnology and all this healing and all this stuff. A lot of people said they didn't like this movie because it just got stupid. And when they said that it just got stupid, if you listen to what they said, it wasn't necessarily the things we're talking about, like it's making bad decisions when it should be a genius. No, what they were saying it got stupid was all this technological advancement. And they're like, oh, it just got silly. They had, he's healing people, there's Superman, there's, all this crazy, he's using, nanotechnology as weapons to just, and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This is actually the one part, a concept that I thought was cool is that, and it's something I talked about in previous episodes of the artificial intelligence series, is if we get an artificial intelligence that gets to human level or surpasses human level, what kind of technological explosion could we see? We could definitely see a technological explosion. I mean, imagine, you've got an Einstein. Now you've got a million Einsteins. You've got people that are superhuman intelligence that make Einstein look like an infant. how quickly could technology explode if you've got that available? I mean, we don't even know. This could, I mean, literally, you get a superhuman intelligence that's benevolent, that's out to just like invent shit and make scientific discoveries. I mean, 10 years from now, you could see the same kind of advancements that we've saw that's taken the last 100 years. You know, I mean, the world wouldn't even look the same. So that's something to me that's really exciting about artificial intelligence. I'm like, how much is artificial intelligence going to benefit the human race? How rich are we going to get if you've got an Einstein level intelligence, but you know what? It's a computer, so you can just copy it. So now we've got thousands, millions of Einsteins out there working, and you say this one work on curing cancer, work on curing disease. This one, work on find a good renewable clean energy source. This one over here, whatever else it may be. I mean, my God. I mean, next time we go to do this podcast, just be like, all right, Darrell, are you ready to teleport to my home to do the show? I mean, why would we do this over Skype anymore?
Oh yeah, I'm going to go right through that jump gate.
Right, exactly. So that was one of the things that was kind of cool. A cool concept they explored in this movie was that absolutely, you get a superhuman artificial intelligence. We could see a technology explosion, and I'm really excited because the things I'm hearing is that in our lifetime, we're going to see an artificial intelligence. We're going to see the singularity, an artificial intelligence that reaches human level or beyond intelligence. And, I don't know. That's what could come of that. Lord only knows. People are going to be falling in love with their operating systems. This is going to happen. Like we talked about in the movie Her from Spike Jonze. And there, they actually were smart in that one. And gee, you know what? An artificial intelligence could actually be really, really freaking good at adapting to humans and being extremely likable to whatever humans, because they have, they don't have certain restrictions that that humans do. So, they could sit here and have a relationship with 6,000 different people and be really close friends or more than friends, so it's exciting. So
I agree. I think that there are many things you remarked on that people have already written about. The book Childhood's End, I believe I didn't Google that one yet, but that is one of those books where I believe it covers what would happen if an artificial intelligence of a sort, though it's a little different, completely captivates and covers the entire world. What would that look like? And I think that goes into it. There are other books that are similar in the way they describe this type of situation. I think I remember something to the effect of Stanley Kubrick. Oh yeah, that was by Arthur C. Clarke, by the way, Childhood's End. And as far as I remember reading something to the effect of how Stanley Kubrick was asked, about making a Childhood's End, and he was saying that would never work because the ruling class would never allow such a thing. Something to that effect. It was too soon, as some people might say. Too soon. And there are many situations where people would be very afraid of the augmented person. I think Blade Runner was a great movie to demonstrate that, where we had people who are obviously way more physically capable and thus a serious threat security-wise. And they demonstrate this is what happens when someone is able to lift thousands of pounds. But this is what happens in terms of like deadly force being used by someone who can lift thousands of pounds. So in this movie, they really make it soft. They make it like this artificial intelligence named Will is just really trying not to rip people limb from limb, as his minions certainly could do. If they could lift that like thousands of pounds thing, then they could do that too. So that's just something to consider right there. This was like this alleged artificial intelligence was relatively using a soft hand, putting himself in a vulnerable place, like I'm in one place, see, here's where I am, that type of thing. And, easy enough somehow for the terrorist organization to find him. The government seems to be the last to get involved, which I would say is the most absurd thing. Like many big blockbuster movies, they want the government to seem incompetent and yet the savior. And I understand why. I mean, that goes into liberty themes that we'll touch on, but, certainly there are many ideas that are promoted. I just was speaking with a friend today about how the situation of the government, people are still using the terms our government or my government, like they have one. And you don't.
Or we and us.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have one. I mean, there's still too many people who are using those pronouns, and they're thinking in those terms like you really have one. Like, and the actual reality, of course, is that, as we both know, as all the liberty-oriented people who are listening to this know, that is a fiction or a MacGuffin. You're just asked to believe it absent any evidence. You don't have evidence. No, representatives are not evidence that you are in any way control of the military-industrial, political, the whole complex going on there. You're not in any control of that, so you don't have it. And that comes down to boundaries. So now I wanted to touch on the liberty themes, unless you wanted to go back to more AI stuff.
Oh, we can go back to more of the AI stuff later. If you want to go into liberty, do it.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
It's boundaries. There's a very missing area of boundaries being known and mutually respected, and it starts off as extremely in your face when the artificial intelligence takes over one of the workers on his plant that he just augmented and I think repaired from near death. He takes over that man to say, like, as if essentially, like, I'm back, it's me. I can touch you now. It's like, Evelyn, I'm here, and it's like,
Right.
It's that type of thing, It's like if your lover died and then suddenly completely took over someone's body and then say, like, well, hey, I'm back, so, hey, we can, hey, do you want to go dancing? You want to go to bed now with me? It's like, wait a second. What happened to the guy who was owning that body right before you took over, And there's a lack of ownership and boundaries, You just, once again, just total lack of boundaries and ownership. And I totally do understand the same thing with this artificial intelligence taking over every computer. Why stop there when you can take over every person? When you don't have any scruples of what is yours and what is someone else's, then you can just keep going and going. As many people might know from their personal life, there was an absolute lack of explicitly understood boundaries. And Evelyn was just standing there, basically exclaiming something was wrong, but not ever pointing to the horrible fact that this person in front of her just completely had his own personality subservient to her dead lover, apparently, as she thinks of it. But I would say instead of was, the child of her dead lover being an artificial intelligence. Same name, Will, And that, of course, is, either infant behavior or disgusting totalitarian behavior. It's just not knowing boundaries. That's the first one.
Right. Yeah, so, and again, this is examples of just how incompetent this AI was. He would know. If there's anybody who would know, it would be his frickin' wife, and that, I'm going to need to approach this gently, with the gentlest of touches, and not just come out and be like, oh, look, it's me. I can touch you now. You know what I mean? He would, explore this, continue to explore it from the interface that she's used to before going into that area, introduce it and be like, the interface, if you've not seen the movie, it starts off where he's just a video on a screen. So he's an image on a screen and a voice. So, he would have breached the subject there and felt her out with extreme delicacy. But no, he just in your face, violating all boundaries. So, yeah, and the liberty themes are interesting. He does all these things, which he does them in the name of quote unquote good.
Right.
So throughout this movie, you're seeing, step back. So you gave the example of the guy who's on the brink of death. Well, he heals him. Now, and any doctor, if somebody gets brought in with 3 gunshot wounds and is unconscious to the emergency room, they just heal him. They're not going to be like, well, we need to get his consent because maybe he just wants to bleed out. You just heal. You just heal him in that case. So I mean, I was okay with that. But then there's the whole taking over. Did he actually get permission before he took over this guy and entered him into the Borg collective? I don't know. That's not really discussed. But a number of these things, throughout the movie, they keep saying, this thing's too powerful. It's a threat. Look at all, it keeps wanting more and more power. And meanwhile, the only stuff that he's ever done has been things that are quote unquote good. So he's healing. He's not killed anyone. All he's done is like healed cripples that have come to his door. People have come, or once the videos go viral of this guy that was, on the brink of death that he brought back, cripples start lining up to come and, please heal me kind of thing.
Right.
And so it's like he's like, well, all I'm doing is good. And you find out that this nanotechnology that he's going to release in the world, he was going to release it through the rain clouds, is going to remove pollution, sort of thing. He's going to do all these things that were, that it would be viewed as being morally good according to his ethics. And most people would, of course, who wouldn't want pollution removed from the environment? Now, the strategy of introducing these nanites that some centralized AI has control over and can then give them other directives after they've removed the pollution. Maybe I don't go for that strategy, but yeah, of course, I would, of course I'd love to see pollution removed. So that was an interesting thing that kept coming up, is there was this morality thing where the people were really, really scared of this AI, and they portrayed him as creepy as possible so that you would actually kind of be on the side of the terrorists. Because they kept portraying him as creepy, and again, because he was so incompetent, it was easy to portray him as creepy because he wasn't doing a PR campaign. He was he was very robotic in his presentation of himself, etc. The whole time, the director, the movie producers or whatever they're trying to portray him as being the bad machine, and convincing you that he's actually the enemy, even though he's really not done anything evil. He's done some things that are maybe morally ambiguous or questionable, like that crossing of boundaries, like, he saved the guy's life, but then had him join to the collective. Would he have been better off to just let him die? If you pose the question to me, say, Chris, you have the choice of bleeding out on the floor, or your life is saved, but you're going to be part of a hive mind. What do you do? I don't know. I mean, I might just join that hive mind. So it's not like it was, at worst case scenario, it's morally ambiguous. But he really didn't do anything evil, but because he's just such a creep, he's so creepy. And they're playing on these fears of, people are scared of the machines. We've got the Terminator movies and the Matrix and all this stuff. There's a long history. They kind of play on that, and they want you to get you on the side of the terrorists. And so much so that, there's the friend of the family, Max Waters, fairly early, maybe midway through the movie, they get him on their side. Yeah. And then late in the movie, they actually are able to get the wife. They're able to get Will Castor's wife onto their side and to join the terrorists. Yeah. And at the end of the movie, then you find out that he really was just like a good guy all along. He really just wanted the best. He wasn't trying to take over anything. He's like, look, I'm just trying to heal the sick and heal the earth by removing pollution and stuff. What the hell? They do this kind of they trick you to get you to side with them, knowing that there's this history of the machines being bad, and then switch it at the end. So I thought that was actually kind of cool that they did that. I thought, and it was one of those things where you hope that people going forward will kind of take away a message from this and say, you know what? I was really scared of the technology in that movie, and I was wrong. In the end, I was wrong. I shouldn't have been scared of the technology. Technology is just a tool. Whoever, it could be used for good or bad. Like a gun, it could be used for good or bad. So the artificial intelligence is no different. I was wrong. when I encounter this the next time, I'm going to be a little more rational and not jump to the conclusion that this is an evil thing and it must be stopped. Because as far as I can tell, based on the projections that experts in the field are saying, we're going to see this happen. And there's going to be a fair number of, Neo-Luddites out there that are going to flip out. So I thought that was kind of cool. They tricked you they try to trick the audience to be like, he's evil, he's evil, he's evil. And at the end, they're like, you know what? He actually didn't do a single thing that you could classify as evil. You would have to really make it a stretch to classify it evil. All it was just the fears that they were playing off of. People were scared of him, but he actually didn't do anything. He didn't kill anybody.
Well, I would take difference is what I just mentioned, taking over someone's body and say, Evelyn, it's me, or taking over someone.
That's crossing a boundary, though. That's not, that's not,
okay.
That's evil? That's evil? Seriously, that's evil?
I guess it's like, yeah, okay, like in using the adjective evil, I would say it's extremely concerning. Like, any one of our friends who cross such a boundary to take over another one of our friends and use that person's body to communicate to us, what do we, it doesn't matter, giving an adjective like evil, it's so concerning that you want to say, whoa, hold on there. Yes, I'm very glad that he didn't use his army to rip people limb from limb, to completely take over, to seed himself into every possible person through the environment, to create all these different artificial intelligences everywhere like that. Although in the end of the movie, it almost looks like maybe that's what he did. He sort of faked his own, like this artificial intelligence faked its own death, like as if like say, oh, I guess I wasn't clever enough. And then there's the end of all computing and Wi-Fi ever, which I also think was utterly an absurd MacGuffin.
Oh my God, that was so bad.
Yeah, because that's the thing, that there's any excuse possible to say, here's how we have to wipe out all electromagnetic technology, isn't that cool? To have an army guy on every street corner with your loaded guns to try to keep the peace, The same thing, like hoping that this incompetent government is there just to be a savior, The same type of story, the same type of, that incompetent government, they would never have such access to such high technology, right? It's so absurd. There's so many things to buy, and I just personally cannot buy. And anytime I actually bring them up, all I would hear, rather than an actual elucidated objection, would be the silence of someone who's considering the veracity of my words, which is because it's true. Like what I'm saying is real. Like if people would stop and think for a moment, anyone listening, anyone thinking, watching this movie, you would say, this is the highest levels of military power now that, or maybe it's already transcended that. And yes, probably there are safeguards and prophylactics put in play to make sure that it stays within certain bounds, that it can be utilized for certain objectives and then cannot be utilized against people, and that there's things put in play so that the random scientist with a bunch of servers can't make this up on their own, that they're always looking for someone coming up with stuff like this on their own. Look into free energy devices. There's more than 50 of them, and some of the untimely deaths of the people who come up with them. It's really a fascinating subject like that.
Right.
It just goes on and on. The evidence is incredible. So there are the usual promotions in such a movie that's funded to this level, where they're trying to, keep they're trying to, promote a fear here and promote an acceptance there. It's the usual programming that I see.
Yeah, there's some debate about whether this was pro-technology or anti-technology. So some people say because of the switcheroo at the ending, it was pro-technology. But there's a lot of other people who are like, you know what? Most people who watch this movie are going to come away feeling anti-technology. So, it's interesting. I don't know. I lean more on the side of it being a pro-technology movie. I think that's what the message they got across, and that's the message I got from it. But I did want to get into one topic, though, that was presented in this movie that's a really fascinating topic. And it's that the uploading of the human consciousness. Now, so we've talked about that, and one of the questions, the philosophical questions that they spent a lot of time exploring was, is this actually the person? Is it Will Castor, or is it some computer program that shares a few traits with Will Castor? So, I agreed with you. You said clearly this is not Will Castor. This is some other entity that he gave birth to. I agree 100%. I'm like, there's no question here. This is not Will. This is not Will. His wife is like, it's him, it's him, it's him. And the Max Waters character, the guy who was played by Paul Bettany, it's funny, and he's like the best friend of the couple, and they don't really go there with Max Waters, with the Paul Bettany, like, romantically desiring Rebecca Hall, at least not that I remember, but you almost felt like there was this tension, he's like, he keeps telling her, it's not Will, let him go, I'm sick of beating off, it's time for you to come on over here, they don't exactly go there, but it's, it was kind of funny, I felt like he's like, you really need to let your husband go, it's clearly not him. And, my bed needs to be warmed up a little bit, so why don't you come on over this way? Maybe I'm just reading that into there, but I kind of thought that was an interesting thing that they kept putting in there. But for me, I'm like, of course, this is not Will. It is not him. No. So, I mean, first of all, there's no way to separate a person from their body. If we can copy, let's just take the MacGuffin, and just say, okay, we have technology where we can copy the patterns that are occurring in the brain. Those are not occurring in a vacuum. You're getting signals. I mean, like, half the nervous system is in the gut. People talk about, well, I had this gut feeling. That's actually a true thing. I mean, the nervous system is throughout the body, and there's just, I just don't see how you can separate the body from the mind and it being the same thing. It's not the same thing at that point. And even, let's just say they perfectly 100%, they're mimicking what's going on in the gut. They're mimicking, like, the nervous system down to, like, from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. They have mimicked those electrical signals or whatever it is that occurs, in the physiology of our bodies. They've got it perfectly mapped out and can simulate it in a computer. Mm-hmm. As soon as it starts having different experiences than the body has, it's not the same thing anymore. Mm-hmm. So let's just say you can somehow perfectly clone me, and you've got a clone, you snap your fingers, there's a clone of me sitting right beside me. It's a perfect copy of me, so, like, it's got all the same memories I have and all of that. And you press that magic button and it appears beside me. At that moment, we are exactly the same. 2 seconds later, we start having different experiences. I'm on one side of the room, it's on the other. A few minutes later, it walks out. It's now having a whole set of different experiences. You go out and it's like, okay, it's no longer having the same experiences. It's totally separate. And clearly, this AI character was having experiences that the human could never have, being part of the internet and absorbing all of the knowledge of the human race instantly and being in all these other places. And one of the things that it would have been nice to see explored that they didn't explore, and this would have been an awesome question, philosophical question, ethical question to kind of explore, ethical topic, I should say, is they had the personality of Johnny Depp uploaded just prior to his death. So what you didn't ever get to see was Johnny Depp the human side by side with this creature that had birthed Johnny Depp the AI. Because then it would have been very clear, this is not Will. It would have been like, okay, that's not, Will's right here. What's on the computer is not Will. That's something else. But that would have been really, really cool. And they, I think they just didn't want to even go there. Maybe that's too complex of a topic to discuss in this movie. So they had it perfectly timed that Johnny Depp dies the second his brain is uploaded. And that's a really, really fascinating ethical, philosophical thing to think about is, okay, let's assume we can perfectly copy ourselves. We can upload. What happens from there? Well, we upload instantly. It's doing stuff that I'm not doing, so we're now no longer the same entity. It can make copies of itself. There's a book. It's not really a great. I would kind of compare it to Transcendence. Actually, it's called Accelerando. It's from Charles Stross, the sci-fi author, and they explore the heck out of this topic. Not really a great book. I read the book. I was just like, eh. But the concepts explored were pretty cool. And in this concept, they really, to the nth degree, explore the concept of uploading your consciousness to a computer, to the internet, whatever. So you'll see things in this Accelerando book where, like, uploaded personalities are doing things like, if I decide to have, it would be interesting to see what it would be like if I had a relationship with this other uploaded personality. I'm going to spin off a clone of myself, because, again, we're just software at that point. How many copies of software are there out there running in the world? How many copies of Windows 8 are running on various devices around the world? Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to spin off a copy of myself, and I'm going to simulate the next 100 years with me being monogamous in a monogamous relationship over here to the side with this other person, and just see what happens. Okay, we let that program run. 30 seconds later, we've got 100 years of simulated experience. I'm going to merge that program back into mine and explore it. Oh, wow, look at that. Boy, I would have not imagined I would have went in that direction. And you see this stuff, and there's things where, like, a part of the personality would be spun out, and in real time, 20, 30, I don't know, I forget, maybe 50 years would go by, and they would finally come back together, would be completely isolated. So, like, there are these people that are on, like, one side of the galaxy, right? And they're having experiences, these artificial intelligences that used to be humans that were uploaded. They're having experiences on one side of the galaxy. They come back home and find their copies that have been running here, and they're like, oh my God, you married him? What? Because it'll be like, there's the scene where, like, these explorers that went to the other side of the galaxy were just friends and never got romantic, right? So they've had this experience of, like, a century together of being just comrades, where, they were co-workers essentially on this trip to the other side of the galaxy. They come back home and they find out their personalities have been married and having kids and stuff like that here. And they're like, what the hell? How did that happen? And there's, like, totally divergent. But yeah, there's all these different things. Once you can upload the consciousness to a computer, where it's just software, there's so many interesting things that can happen. Like, is it me anymore? Well, no, probably not. What about if I make a copy of it? I've got one copy of me running on this server, one copy of me running on this server. Are those the same? What about property rights? Who owns the property of this? Like, if I die and I will all my property to my uploaded personality, and that personality starts making clones of itself. And then some of the clones are saying, you know what? No, I have control of the material wealth, in the physical world, in the land of meat bags. I control that. No, and I'm taking you to court, and I'm contesting it. You don't have control of it. The human willed it to me, damn it. And there's just so many interesting things. And so it was cool to kind of see it in a movie where they upload. Of course, it's not the first time we've seen this topic touched on. You had, the Lawnmower Man is one where, the guy tries to upload to the internet, and there, various themes like, what was it, virtuosity and things like that. But yeah, they didn't explore it as much as they could have, but it was still kind of neat to see that topic explored in a movie, even if the execution was terrible. So, what were your thoughts on the, uploading of a personality aspects of this movie?
I think it's very important to go back to grammar of the mind to understand what a person is. Like, obviously we understand what the body seems to be composed of, but as far as what the mind and the actual consciousness of a person, well, I recommend everyone go to put in your search engine Rupert Sheldrake TED Talk. This is one of the 2 banned TED Talks out there. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because this is a researcher, a scientist, who's gone about some time to try to understand these questions. What exactly is the mind composed of, according to the various researches going on around the world? Some of what people call very smart and clever people out there. What do they come up with? And though they keep trying to find it in the nervous system, no matter where you look, it ain't there. It's just not there. Now, I would speculate that's because the actual consciousness of a person probably is an electromagnetic phenomenon that interfaces with the nervous system, but does not exist in the nervous system. In the same way as Conan O'Brien doesn't exist in your flat-screen TV, he is channeled through the TV. Okay? It's really very simple. Now, there are a lot of people who might take exception to this idea. And of course, I said, it's speculation. I don't really know. I would say that I see enough evidence that seems to support the conclusion that it does not exist within the nervous system or within the synapses or within the biochemistry and electromagnetic functioning, but that it shows that these are phenomena that happen. And when if you injure the brain or nervous system, you injure the interface, and then you see a change in the person in a fundamental way. Whereas if you injure other parts of the body, it's not nearly as fundamental. And certainly, by the way, the ancients used to think that, or some ancient cultures were considering that the personality was held within the liver. And I'm not making that claim at all. I would say more like this, that the electromagnetic function, which is the person's personality and consciousness, does not live in the body, although it interpenetrates through the body and connects via the nervous system. So, if that might be true, and if that might be, like the speculation is so, then copying the electromagnetic pattern of a person would require that a person is able to understand where is this electromagnetic pattern, where exactly does this exist, with this an invisible cloud around a person, for example. And that might be so. If you had the right technology, you'd be able to take a picture of it. You'd be able to take a really good picture of it, like a video of it, as you're suggesting, Chris, and you'd be able to actually make a copy of that. Now, there are luckily a variety of books that go into what would happen if this type of technology was available. John Varley is a science fiction author who covers this in one of his books, The Ophiuchi Hotline. But a bunch of his books, the books of John Varley, Varley, he covers this subject. He's definitely got cloning and the replication of people as a theme in some of his books. Really fun books, by the way. And this is a type of thing where if people just have an assumption that they know the grammar of the consciousness or the mind, then yeah, you could just run with that. You're making an assumption that you know it. I'm making no such assumption. I will blatantly say I'm making a speculation I do not know. But I would speculate that if I had to bet on it, I would probably bet that it's an electromagnetic function that is outside and yet interpenetrating the body, kind of like an invisible electromagnetic cloud. And that's how it works. And if you have the ramifications of copying would be, as John Varley would say, cultures would set up laws, or I would say within a certain geographic region, people would have a certain custom that is extremely encouraged for everyone to follow along with, and that there might be consequences for not following, as there are in John Varley's books. There are consequences of making copies of yourself that are not put on the record. And in some cultures even, they had a very strict rule of one person and no copies of that person. And as these people were nearly immortal, by the way, in that book, in most of his books, by the way, it comes down to it as one person, one child. There were a lot of sex changes, just to give you an idea. So people could, choose to spend 100 years as a man, 100 years as a woman, etc. And everyone gets to give birth to one child of sorts, I think that that's an idea, and some people were off the grid and making tons and tons of copies of themselves. And that's what happened in the book, The Ophiuchi Hotline. There are a lot of ramifications, what happens when you have real cloning and real replication of consciousness. I think that, like anything, it always comes back to boundaries, ownership, property, the mutual understanding and respect of who owns what. Seems to come back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic that it's just beyond what anything we've had to really deal with, because this technology doesn't exist. So this question of, is it this person or not? Is it a separate entity or not? How long does an AI need to exist on a separate machine having different experiences before it's no longer the same AI anymore? It's now had enough experiences that it's a separate AI, and how important is that distinction? These kind of things, they're interesting things to ponder, and so when you come across philosophical questions presented in works of fiction, it can be kind of fun. So that was some of the redeeming qualities of this movie, was just that you get to see some of these fun philosophical questions explored, even though the execution of the movie was overall fairly bad. So, a couple other just emptying the notebook here. Some other things that were interesting in the movie. They had, I don't know if you noticed this, but they had some things with naming going on. So like Will Castor is one of the Gemini twins in mythology, where the Gemini twins, one of them is immortal, is a deity, the other is mortal, and is always wanting to be immortal because he's jealous because his brother is immortal, and the one that is immortal is like feels bad because his brother isn't immortal, and so he ends up like voluntarily giving away his immortality and all this stuff. So that was kind of an interesting thing to play on names. You've got the Max Waters character, and then Water is kind of a big role in the movie towards the end, where he's spreading his nanites through the entire world, through the weather systems, through rain, and then you've got the ending of the movie, speaking of which, where a lot of people missed this, apparently, that they didn't understand that he actually lived on as he's about to have most of the nanites killed, most of the technology in the world taken out. He tells his wife, remember our garden, concentrate on our garden. She uploads to the internet, and then you see in the garden, he's got it set up where it's screened from all of these other connections from, I forget, what was the attack that they used to wipe out all the technology? Was it like the nuke?
Computer virus, as far as I remember.
Right, that's right. I was just trying to remember why everything else went down after that, though.
Yeah, that's a MacGuffin. It's like saying no one could keep their own, especially as if the government can keep their own devices hidden in trenches deep amongst a variety of Faraday cages, for example. Completely untouched and offline. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was crazy because this world was turned back to being very primitive. Like there was power outages regularly and all this stuff. And it's hello, the internet has only been around since the 90s, at least not in a way that was impactful to most people. I mean, I guess it technically existed for a few decades before that, but nobody was pretty much on it at that point. So I'm hello, I lived in those times when the internet was not being used by anybody, was not relevant, and you know what? It didn't look like the world you presented. So why would just the internet being brought down do this? That was kind of a ridiculous thing. But at any rate, that at the end they've got their alcove, the garden, in the water, through the water, the nanites get there, and their consciousness lives on through these nanites, and you see the two sunflowers being healed by the nanites and the like, and yeah, it definitely had its shortcomings for sure. Well, even the virus thing, talking about the virus, I'm hello, do you not have antivirus software? Do you not? I have antivirus software, and I'm not the most genius personality. I'm not the smartest being ever in the existence, but yet I know to have antivirus software. It's like, hello.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously another MacGuffin. Wouldn't I love to just be in the ruling class's architect room as they were discussing the creation and release of this movie, and to what the hell end, or what ends does this help indoctrinate people? I looked at the financing of the movie from the Chinese company DMG Entertainment. This is DMG that added elements from, they added Chinese elements to the movie Looper and the movie Iron Man 3, which it did not do so for Transcendence. It's always interesting, follow the money is a very, very important question. And this movie certainly cost a lot of money, and to some degrees, for certain people, made a lot of money. So it, besides being a programming instrument for people's consciousness, which is an aspect of what movies are for, it's very important to ask more questions when you are watching these things. When you're relaxing with your various beverages of choice or your self-medication choices that you're doing at night with your movies, perhaps, before letting it go completely to your reptilian brain and being programmed, maybe write down a few questions to ask about what you're consuming. That's what I wanted to leave with.
Nice. Yeah, I've started following the tactics laid out in the book, How to Read a Book. And I found that basically if the general premise of How to Read a Book is you should be interviewing, you should be questioning the author of a book. And obviously you don't have the author in front of you, so you're questioning the book as you're reading it. And it gives you various questions to ask the book, and then try to figure out what the answers are as presented by the author through the book. But I've taken that to using those questions that are laid out in this book, How to Read a Book, when I'm watching movies, when I'm listening to podcasts even. I can sit there and I can engage, I can actively read the book, I can actively watch the movie or listen to the podcast as opposed to passively absorbing it by using the questioning technique. It gives my mind a lot more to think about, I guess, by using those. So it's good stuff.
That's a good thing. And for those out there who don't know Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book, I would suggest that it's got some useful tactics, and I would further suggest to look into the very important question of who is Mortimer Adler. Very fascinating subject.
Interesting. All right, well, before we close this out, any final thoughts on Transcendence? Or
we gave away so many spoilers to this movie, and in this case, unlike with her, I don't care.
Right.
I don't think it's really. I don't feel bad about giving spoilers on this movie at all. In fact, I hope I saved people from watching it. That's what I would like to leave with.
Right. Yeah, the only good takeaways from the movie were the philosophical questions, which we've already explored in this, so you don't need to watch the movie to yourself entertain these philosophical questions and think about them and get some enjoyment out of that. So, cool. All right. So if the listeners want to find you, as usual, give them the links.
Please go to voluntaryvisions.com. Please do consider clicking on the Support My Book project. And in general, please enjoy the various audio and written productions that I drop there.
Nice. Cool. All right, Darrell. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, don't mention it.